Hey, good evening, everybody. Hey, my name is, whoa, this is loud. Hey, my name is John Ramey. I lead I'm the organizer, one of the organizers for Awesome Deep Learning. So if you're here to see another meetup or for some other event, you're probably in the wrong place. So welcome. Again, my name is John Ramey. Tonight, we're going to do something a little different. So there's a challenge when you're running a meetup with January. Everybody has just come back from the holidays. No one wants to give a talk. Anybody that might have something cool to show. The challenge is that, you know, if you go back a week and a half ago, people were just getting back to work after the holidays, right? So I always find it very difficult to get a talk scheduled in January. So what I decided to do is to talk a little bit about the meetup itself. We have a great turnout, especially for January. I have a lot of numbers, actually, that I collect on the meetup. Data scientist by trade, so I'm kind of conditioned to do that. So tonight, we're really going to be talking about the meetup itself as opposed to deep learning, but towards the end, we're going to do something quite new, something we've never done before. It'll be a little bit more interactive, and it will be very focused on you as opposed to me. So I'll be talking for probably 15, 20 minutes. Tonight's talk is not very technical. Like I said, it's very much about the meetup, but I'm going to tell you a little bit of a story. And Daniel, I'm glad you're here, because you'll understand why in just a moment. Okay, so before we get going, I'd like to thank kungfu.ai. They've been a really good partner and sponsor for us. The pizza is paid for by them. Got to know their people. They're fantastic. They're always looking for fairly senior data scientists, machine learning engineers. Hit me up after, and I can point you to them. Also, thank you to Capital Factory. They make this possible. It's one thing to get a room. It's another thing to get a large room. And this room in particular is a premium, right? So there can be some competition for this room, but we have such a large meetup and we have such a consistently meeting meetup that they really help us out, and they do a great job with that. We have 2 talks coming up, February and March, that I'm really excited about. I'll talk about it in just a moment. We have 3 or 4 talks that are queued up for April through June, but I do not have anything nailed down. So please reach out to me if you have a talk in mind, and we will say a lot more about that a little bit later. But I do need talks for April through June. One thing that's amazing about this meetup is our talks are high quality. I think when we set out to start this meetup, we had a goal of having extremely high quality talks, something that people would want to come see and hear and learn or be engaged with. And we've had the good fortune of doing that. We'd like to keep that going in 2020. So what I'm most excited to talk about is that starting next month and also leading into March, we will have 2 history of artificial intelligence talks. Go into a little bit more detail in a moment, but I'm very excited. I'm already seeing a lot of RSVPs. I kind of track RSVPs as they come, and this is going to be a very popular talk. So extremely excited about that. It starts next month, going into March. After this meetup, we typically go to CU29 across the street. It's a cocktail bar. We carry this conversation over there. The goal of this meetup is to create a community, create a group of people who, whether they be novices, intermediate, or advanced, or even researchers, people who are engaged, right? So let's go to CU29. Even if you don't drink alcohol, drink water. I'll buy you a glass of water. Please come over, and let's keep the talk going. If you don't know about our Slack channel, please sign up. So I'm going to very quickly, for those who are new, how do you get to the Slack channel? Where is that thing? So if you go into the Meetup site, and I think you have to be logged in order to see this. Apologies. Go to, there we go, Awesome Deep Learning, right? Meetup.com, Awesome Deep Learning, and I'll zoom in just a bit. Down here, it says discussions. You'll see something that says Meetup Slack. Literally, you click the link. It's going to take you to a Heroku bot I set up a lifetime ago. And it's kind of slow because it's the free one. And what you'll do is you put your email address in there. It'll email you automatically, and you'll get plugged in, right? So a big part of this meetup, well, it's really slow. I may have to reboot it. There we go. All right, so you see 643 users are registered so far. you just type your email address in, it'll take care of everything else. You'll get an email, sign in, right? So the goal here is all about community. Let's keep this thing going in 2020. All right, last thing, I'm going to plug a little bit for the Journal Club. Abai and Daniel, they have done a fantastic job of organizing a lot of papers that we are going to be reading over the next year. Please have a look at those. There's a voting mechanism via Trello. It's very easy. Go there, specifically into the paper group channel within Slack, and you'll figure out everything from there. If you have any questions about it, just hit me up after. I'm supposed to plug another event. Abai would be very upset with me if I didn't tell you about this, so this is pretty exciting. So there's an event called Pi and AI. So I'm going to read what Abai told me to read, and you see it on the screen. Let me zoom in a little bit. So we will host an event with deeplearning.ai. It's called Pi and AI. He's going to send out an announcement. The event will feature talks from local industry experts and scientists. So we do need local industry experts and scientists. These are people who either do data science for real at work, you're doing it in production, not something like you created a Tableau dashboard and that's called AI. We're talking about somebody who's really building end-to-end solutions, going from data to building algorithms on top of that. We will be giving out discounts and coupons for Andrew Ng's deeplearning.ai specialization and courses, as well as food and, of course, Pi. Talks will be about overcoming unexpected challenges and building real-life machine learning products, because data is hard. Data at scale is even harder. We'll focus around ML infrastructure, model generalization, robustness, and managing expectations. So be looking forward to an announcement from that. Pretty excited about that. All right, so let's move on. All right, tonight's talk, if you don't know me in person, my name is John Ramey. No one calls me John. Why? There's too many Johns in the world. I've been Ramey since I was 5 years old. My dad was military, so I've been going by Ramey since kindergarten. So I was a nerd as a kid, and I'm a nerd as an adult. I do data science at a startup here in town called Novi Labs. Very excited to continue working there. I've been there for a long time. In startup world, I've been there for a lifetime. My background is stats, computer science, and math. True nerd, but I also am an athlete, so I kind of like straddle both being a nerd and pretending like I'm cool. I helped co-found this meetup in July 2016, and we're going to say a little bit more about that moving on. All right, so Austin Deep Learning. If by now you haven't realized you're about to hear something about Austin Deep Learning, you're in the wrong place, but that's fine. Maybe we can get you to come back. All right, so let's go back three and a half years ago, right? So deep learning in 2016, AlexNet, if you're not familiar with AlexNet, AlexNet was one of the first classifiers to really change the game in computer vision. So there's a competition every year called ImageNet. There's a data set. There's a classification problem associated with that. There were people who were doing feature engineering by hand. They had made a huge career out of this. And this group shows up, presents something called AlexNet. The results were so mind-bogglingly good that it made a splash. There were all kinds of, people were very upset. If your career is built on hand engineering features, and then somebody shows up with an automatic solution, you could imagine that was, it turned a lot of heads. After that, there's a handful of tools. They weren't necessarily easy to use. So there was Theano, there was Café, and there's a huge list at that time. Amazon actually had one at some point. The guy who created that, he gave a talk in 2016 about that very thing. One of the things in 2016, there was a lot of discussion about research code versus production code, right? So back then, you had Torch versus PyTorch when that came on the scene. You had Café versus Café 2. There was a very clear dichotomy between people who were moving the needle on the research front and those people who were trying to deploy this thing in production. And then one other thing is that TensorFlow had just come out. That was November 2015, actually. And man, there was a lot of hype. There was so much hype. so much hype. Let's go back to an article. I think this is from Slate, Why Watson is Real Artificial Intelligence. This is several years ago, right? This is one of my favorites. It's from Newsweek. You can't talk about AI without having robots, and like the subtext here that you can't quite see, that basically says, quote, robots are coming to take your jobs, your homes, your children, except it's real. That's what it says in the subtext that you can't quite read, right? So there was so much hype, and this is one of my favorite. Elon Musk, a machine tasked with getting rid of spam could end humanity, right? This was the world we lived in 4 or 5 years ago. And so there were two of us. There's me on the left, and there's Pierce Spittler. He's one of the founders of the Meetup. We were on the data science team at Black Locust, and he and I, it was just us two. That's how the Meetup started. So I said, actually, I'm going to tell you in just a moment that the Meetup started August 2016. That's actually not quite true. It was the end of 2015 when TensorFlow came out. So we were meeting Sundays at Strange Brew Coffee, which doesn't exist anymore, I don't think. We were asking questions like, should we use Cafe? Should we use Theano? Should we use TensorFlow? But the problem was, at the time, it would take us, okay, if we wanted to play with Cafe, it would take us probably an entire weekend to get the thing to set up on our local machine. How much worse was it to get it set up on the cloud? So I'm actually going to show you what started the Meetup. So I have a blog that I don't maintain as much anymore. I wrote this thing way back because why did I write it? Because I was so frustrated with getting AWS, getting GPU support for TensorFlow on EC2. And I wrote this thing a long time ago. You see January 5th, 2016. Hopefully you can see that. That was 4 years ago now, right? What I didn't expect this thing was to trigger a lot of interest. So what we realized 4 years ago is that we should build a community, right? We had a lot of questions. Should I use a really big computer? Do I even need a really big computer? Should I wait to, it was pretty obvious at that time with the likes of Kubernetes and a bunch of other orchestration frameworks coming out that we would be able to scale eventually. And so I was betting that at some point you would just be able to do everything in the cloud. Why waste your money on a really big computer? While Pierce had a different view. So, which is perfectly fine. So that's why we created a community, right? So we said, let's start a homebrew computer club. And if you're not familiar with that, that goes back to the 70s with the whole origins of Apple. It's a group of a tight-knit group of people who are really into the technical details, where a lot of amazing things came out of a group of people who cared a lot about the topics at the time. So 2016, I gave a talk. And I want you to look at the title here, which is Introduction to Deep Learning, Demystifying the Hype. So if you think about the hype at that moment in time, we realized there was a lot of hype. We were tired of the hype because we realized there was something to actually, there were real tools at the time. There was a subset of the interwebs that was very focused on moving this tech forward. But the thing is if you Googled deep learning at the time, it was so damn annoying because you couldn't find anything useful. TensorFlow docs were terrible at that time. They were just getting going. There was a lot to learn. But our BitFusion, we had one of their founder actually gave a talk a couple months ago here, Subbu Rama. BitFusion was our original sponsor at Techstars in downtown, just above, what is it, Speakeasy? The problem with that place, like we loved BitFusion, we loved Techstars, but we'd start the meetup at 7 o'clock. As soon as 7:30 would hit, the very loud music below us, it would come on thumping. There was parties going on. We could not have a serious discussion. We could not have a serious meetup. We migrated eventually to the domain where we were at a WeWork kind of thing for a while. Eventually, we found Capital Factory, thanks to this gentleman right in front of me, Matt Cohen, and ever since, we have been off to the races. There's one other thing I want to call to your attention about the very first meetup. There were 76 people that signed up for the very first one. We were aiming for, I don't know, like 5, right? We were wanting a tight-knit group of people who would come to the meetup and let's talk about this stuff, let's tear through it, let's really understand. But the thing blew up on us. And so today, we hit the 2,500 mark. So I was actually trying to find yeah, let's do a round of applause. So this meetup has become I think it's one of the largest meetups in the city. Among the data science groups, I think it is the biggest one. I don't know that for sure, but I saw some thing on meetup.com where I think that's true. Whether it is or whether it's not, let's keep this thing going, right? So you're in the right place. And so let's talk a little bit about the meetup itself. Let's talk about numbers. Can you guys see that okay? Does that make sense? All right, so what are you looking at? So this is what attendance looks like. And I actually collect all these numbers. So I actually dump RSVPs to a spreadsheet. So this is from Google Docs or Google Sheets. You can see the RSVPs over time. And so in red, you have the average, which is about 105. And you can see that we've been hovering around 105 since July 1st, 2017. Had a bit of a dip here. That's more because I didn't send out the meetups until the very last minute. When that happens, you often see a dip. But what you're seeing is, on average, 105 people RSVP and say they're going to show up. So if 105 people say they're going to show up, do 105 people actually show up? The answer is no. We actually have what we call the 40% rule among the organizers. It's the best prediction, best regression model I've ever had in my life, right? Let me put this in perspective, and I'll tell you why it's the best prediction ever. So what you're seeing here is that for every meetup since mid-2017, you're seeing actually that of the RSVPs, what percentage of those actually attend. How do I get that number? I literally stand in the back and I count out, right? If you've ever seen me in the back counting, this is the reason I do that, and I'll do that in just a moment. So the 40% rule, I've cut off the data here to mid-2017, but this one I've highlighted in particular. You know, you can do cross-validation all day, but when you put something in production, that's how you know if your model's actually good. Well, this was me putting the model in production. I texted Pierce, co-organizer at that time, and said, you'll never believe it, our prediction of 40% nailed it spot on, right? We predicted exactly how many attendees were going to show up. 2 minutes later, somebody walked in late. And I texted him back and said, I'm sorry, we missed it by 1. And Pierce politely replied to me and said, tell them to leave. Right? So 40%, I would be willing to bet that I'll do this later, but I'm not going to do it right now. But if we were to tally up the number of attendees here, it's going to hover around, let's see, let's do this right now. Okay, so the number of RSVPs is 66, I think. 66. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23. Oh, we're going to miss it. 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30, 31, 32, 33, 34, 35, 36, 37, 38. You guys are an outlier. So 38. If you want to know what the prediction was, it's 26. I mean, that's probably the biggest outlier we've ever had. Actually, this guy right here. So that's great. I love it when more people show up. I was really hoping for that to be perfect. So I'm going to ask all of you to please leave the premises. Okay. Daniel, I told you. All right, so moving on. At some point, we realized the talks were very intro level, very novice level. And so we had been asking the question, remember what the goal of the meetup was, to have a homebrew computer club type group of people who were very knowledgeable, but not just knowledgeable, not just research, but people who were very focused on the cutting edge, drilling into code, looking at papers, and these two guys showed up. And the questions that we were asking around that time is, can we do more advanced stuff? And I credit the Journal Club that was started in January 2018 as a major reason why this meetup went from a moderately successful meetup to a majorly successful meetup. And I've been told, and I'm going to give props to Daniel here in the blue shirt. Daniel, will you raise your hand for us, please? Or your coffee cup? And Abai that you see pictured here. Do we need to inspect what's in there? And Abai, the gentleman you see on the left, he's learning Japanese tonight, so he couldn't be here. anyways, the two guys up here on the screen, they are a big part of what made this meetup has made it so successful. In particular, that goal, the vision of building a community of people who are really knowledgeable. These two guys have been critical. So these guys rock. So I'm going to plug again, and so I put the slides on the Meetup site. If you need to figure out how to join the Slack channel, I already showed you once. I'm happy to do it again. There's a channel called the Paper Group. That's where a lot of discussion is done, and I put a link to the Trello page for that. So these guys, and so we have really good discussions. We have probably, I don't know, 15 to 30 people that show up at any given time. And Abai and Daniel, the two guys on the screen, they are the reason for that. So thank you. What's that? Slack group. So go to the Meetup site. Yeah, it's the same one. Yeah, hit me up after. Okay, so I would like to talk about where we are today. And I would like to kind of give you an overview of the top topics we've had recently. And I would like to talk about what we're going to do next. So recent topics, I just collected a handful of the most recent topics. You kind of see a general pattern emerge when you look at the titles alone. TensorFlow 2.0, image recognition via FPGA, that was a cool demo. Cancer diagnosis via deep learning, that was pretty sweet. SageMaker, a little bit about how to build and deploy models, and then one of the coolest things we've ever done was a panel discussion about ethical AI. But there's a common theme of topics that have emerged that, I mean, it's pretty straightforward. I can almost tell you any given time what we're going to talk about. There's an overview of deep learning frameworks. We've done this ad nauseum, right? I think it is important when they're like, TensorFlow goes to 2.0, let's go through that. That makes sense. But we don't need yet another intro to TensorFlow Meetup talk. I think you could go to YouTube and probably find 20, 25 good talks on that topic. And then there's the one guy, I can't remember his name, that basically plagiarizes everybody else. He can probably give you a pretty good intro talk. But all other common themes that come up are how to train at scale, how to deploy at scale. But I really want to stress a couple of things. We don't share enough code in this meetup, and I would like to share more code, right? Like to get into the nitty-gritty of whether it be TensorFlow code, PyTorch code, whatever code, I don't really care. We need to dive into more code, right? Less intro to whatever and more drilling into the details, the weeds. That way, the newcomer and the more experienced person alike can really learn a few things. Because even somebody who's really familiar with these frameworks can either offer their opinion on the code we're looking at, or they actually may learn add a new tool to the toolkit. And also, one thing I kind of glossed over is that when we first started the meetup, there were two other core things we were hoping to do. One was that one goal we had was that a startup would be founded out of this meetup. And a couple of months ago, maybe it was like 4 months ago, that we actually achieved that. There was a meetup of two people who met here in this room who actually formed a startup, right? They had never met before prior to the meetup. They met, they started a meetup. The second goal we had was to show what you've built, right? The Think Homebrew Computer Club, what were they doing? Constantly showing what they were tinkering on, hardware that they were working with at the time. So we haven't shown enough of what people have built. But that's not to say that we never have. My favorite talk, probably, and unfortunately it's unavailable. I really, really tried, and so I tried to get, I got this Siri is unavailable link. Cochlea.xyz was probably one of the coolest things I've seen. One, it wasn't just some random computer vision thing, right? Everybody has done the ImageNet type thing at length. This one was searching audio segments with audio segments. It's literally like you could take an audio segment, you'd upload it to cochlea.xyz, and unfortunately it's unavailable. I would just show you. And it would actually scan the audio segment that you uploaded, and that it would basically look in a giant database very quickly and find similar audio. And it was really cool because you would actually get everything from music to Chopin and whatever rock band or rap group that you might have in mind, to Martin Luther King's famous speeches and like these random leaders of Italy in like the 50s and 60s that were yelling at you. It was a very, very cool application. Why was it my favorite? Not because it alone was so much cooler than anything else, but it encapsulated and embodied what we set out to do. It was an amazing project that somebody wanted to show off. It was very much show and tell. It was something other than ImageNet, and it really got the wheels turning, right? When I say get the wheels turning, there were so many questions during the talk and after the talk about, well, could you do this? And could you do that? And can I take that same thing and build another tool? There's been a lot of cool things that people have shown off in this meetup, and they've been fantastic. But this one was, I think, one of my favorites because it really, you could see the audience engaged. Everybody wanted to know how it worked, right? That's the goal of this meetup. That's actually a typo. How do you build a successful startup? You can tell what was on my mind. Because I don't know how to do that one. Still trying to figure that one out. How do you build a successful meetup? This is kind of like a slide that kind of put it in the middle of this thing. Why do I put it in quotes? Because I get asked this question all the time. And I'm straight up going to tell you, I don't know. I am still figuring it out, but I'll give you a couple of hints. Focus on community. I'm going to now stop and tell you again, if you're not on the Slack channel, please join up in the Slack channel. A lot of good discussion there. I would really like to see that thing continue to blossom. Pizza, that helps, right? And if you're gonna have pizza, you gotta have partners, right? So, little known facts, actually the first few pizzas I bought myself, right? It ain't cheap. So at some point, you gotta find somebody that can help you out, or you're gonna regret starting a big meetup. So partner with amazing folks. So you see two on the screen here, Capital Factory, of course, and then kungfu.ai in the bottom right. And they take care of everything, right? They make it also super seamless to both organize and provide food. Ground rules. This is probably one of the most important things. Well, there's topics on point because we get a lot of meetups like, hey, let me show you this cool thing I built in something. I'm like, is it deep learning? And if it's not deep learning, is it pretty close? And if the answer is no, then sorry, I can point you to a couple other meetups. The most important one, and I've seen when Pierce and I were at Black Locust, we hosted multiple really big meetups, really big. And one in particular, one meetup was killed, right? It had a huge number of turnout to a point to where Black Locust, we were a startup, we were acquired by Home Depot, and we had Home Depot money, and we would actually outsource chair rental to a company, right? Because we had so many people come to any given meetup that we'd have 200 or 300 people. So we'd actually populate this thing with chairs. That's how popular these meetups were. And in one meetup, killed a meetup because there was a sales pitch, right? What happened was this group, and I will not name the company, but it's definitely a company you've heard of, showed up, and they, in the meetup, the title, the abstract, it said, we're going to talk about all this cool tech, and really it was an hour-long sales demo. Halfway through the meetup, probably 3/4 of the people had left. When 10 minutes were left in the talk, I think there were 5 people in the audience. We went from 200 people down to 5 in less than an hour. And then no one came back, right? That's what happened. So ground rule, no sales pitches. Jacob, you had a question. Is there a question in there? Yeah. Well, actually, we might be able to, excuse me. Hopefully, we can answer that question next time. So, upcoming talks. Always leave them wanting more. History of AI, 2 parts. This is probably the thing I have been begging somebody to do this for a long time, and I found somebody. Not only did I find somebody, I found somebody who really knows a lot about this topic. So please come February and March. This is going to be a lot of fun. So the first talk will be everything leading up to the AI winter. So the guy that, his name is Sanjeev, he said, I want to do this. I have so much content. And he goes, I don't know if I can fit it in one talk. And I said, okay, so great. Let's do 2. And if we have to do 3, that's great too. He's like, well, where do we draw the line? I said, I don't know, AI winter. Great, let's do it, right? So basically the history of AI, not just from an AI perspective, you also have from my background is stats. So there's definitely a strong stats input. Think Alan Turing, R.A. Fisher, those kind of folks. You also have the genetics people. You have the neuroscience people. And then you have your more Minsky-style AI type folk. So everything leading up to AI winter, and then AI winter to present, that will be in March. I'm very excited about this one. I'm hoping to learn a lot, and I'm hoping everyone else will as well. Yeah, that's true. I mean, exactly. Like, why was it such a big deal? Because, I mean, to be honest, I don't think I know as much about that as... Well, I'm specifically the early part of the AI winter.
Like SVMs and
oh, yeah.
Random, like ensemble learning, boosting, that all came from the AI winter.
That's true. Agreed. One of the projects, so this is actually an application that, if you're not familiar with iFly, it's a pretty cool thing. They actually, I already have the slides. They actually, iFly, how do you describe iFly? Does anybody know what iFly is? It's like a simulation. Yeah, it's like a simulation of skydiving. So anyways, they actually have a lot of video that they're capturing, and they have a few problems that they're applying a convolutional neural net, which actually failed miserably. So they kind of did some transfer learning things. It was actually a cool thing that they've done. They've sent me the slides. It's not a sales pitch. It's just a cool overview of what they've been doing. Another thing is that related to one of the themes I mentioned before, call it machine learning ops, if you will, machine learning engineering. That's become, the focus on data science is, I'm not necessarily going to say waning, but quickly, that's such a broad term that there's a lot of focus on data engineering, machine learning engineering. So we have a person who knows a lot about the topic, and he's going to be talking about not only those, but also how those correspond to data products, especially if you're at a startup. All right, so I promised you at the beginning, we were going to do something kind of new. What I would like everyone to do, everyone in this room, so we have 38 people, I would like you to split up into groups of 3 to 5. So if you're at a table, sounds great. Can be 3, can be 5. Just break up into groups of 3 to 5. All right? Let's go ahead and take a couple minutes. We'll do that, and then we'll get moving. That's the next slide.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we're just going to break up into groups of 3 or 5, and that's it. All right, we're done. It's a clustering exercise. The metric is self-selection. Okay. This is what I would like everyone to do. First and foremost, what topics would you like to see? The goal here is member input, right? Because most of the topics come from 2 sources. The person who volunteers, that's obvious. And then 2, I come up with something. The AI history thing was something I pushed for a long time. But I would like to kind of branch out from that a little bit and get your input. Less mine, more you. So first question, you see on the screen, what topics would you like to see in 2020? That's the first question. And so not just one thing, not just 2 things, at least 3 things. To be as specific as possible. Second thing, what changes would you like to see in the format? So thus far, 3.5 years, more code, more tutorials, but every month, somebody gets up here, one person gives a Meetup talk. They go through what they've built, they go through a tutorial. Do we need to change that? That's what we're looking for. If we do need to change, tell me what we need to change to. Or what do we need to kind of add into the mix to spice things up? I know people have gone to other meetups. They've seen other things. You might have your own ideas. A little bit of input. So we're talking about code, more tutorials, more advanced things, more beginner level things. Be creative here. And this is a fine answer. If you tell me everything is fine, meh, I don't have anything for you, I may troll you from this microphone, but I do understand. If you think everything is fine, you're going to keep coming back, that sounds great to me too. I am going to get you started. I'm not going to just keep this completely open-ended. I'm actually working on a project. I'm kind of like halfway through the project where I'm actually I'm scraping celebrity social media, Twitter, Instagram, and then I'm creating a Twitter bot that captions those images and tweets them out, right? Got to be careful there because bad things can happen very quickly in that world. I don't want to be on the front page of CNN or Fox News or whatever. But that's something I'm personally building, and at some point, I will actually be presenting that. Now, I try not to give too many talks just so that other people can, but at some point, I will talk about not only the deep learning aspect of it, but also the engineering side of things, the tweeting and building the whole thing. So, topics to help you out. Something you've built, something you're working on, that can be in the mix. More NLP. So we've actually had relatively little NLP applications, believe it or not. So anything NLP related to deep learning, knock yourself out. More transfer learning. So I don't think we've had enough focus on transfer learning. I think we've had like a couple of initial forays into it, but nothing specific. TensorFlow JS and mobile, those are probably have been pretty underrepresented here. And more specifics on building and deploying at scale. So that's everything from how do you use this platform to, hey, I built a thing and these are all the challenges I ran into. And then, of course, TensorFlow, PyTorch specifics, or something you even rolled your own. Okay? So, yeah, so my recommendation, I'm going to let it, I'm pretty laissez-faire. So, my recommendation is that one person, you nominate one person who's going to kind of collect all of these things, and then I'm going to give you the mic, and I'm going to walk over to you with the mic. So, and you're going to answer the questions or give your feedback on what we should add to the mix. So, recommendation, nominate one person and capture everything. Sound good? Any questions before we get started? Yes, John? Yes, sir. There we go. Any other questions? What topics would you like to see in 2020? What changes would you like to see in the format? All right? What time is it? 7:43. Let's go for about 10 minutes. about 5 more minutes. 5 minutes. All right, a few more seconds. Let's start wrapping up, and then I'll start passing the mic around. All right. Hopefully everybody has had generated quite a few ideas. I'm going to start coming around. I'm going to hand the mic to whoever you've nominated to represent your group. So just, I know you've been talking about this at length. It is 7:56, so let's kind of keep this down to 5 minutes or less per group. So 2 main questions: what topics would you like to see in 2020? And what changes would you like to see in the format? But while I have your attention, so this could potentially generate a lot of conversation, which is great. That's kind of the goal of this meetup in the first place. Community is important to us. Carry the conversation over to CU29. So let's kind of go through these ideas relatively quickly, but let's continue these conversations over at CU29. Okay? All right, here we go.
For a couple of us, this is the first or second or third get-together, so we're not good examples of the experienced. Second, more code is good. My own experience has been doing chatbots and also having been a Boston Computer Club member back in the late 70s. So what happened in those clubs was people would bring parts of gear and find out who could help them take it the next step. And so it was a meetup to either get something running or somebody bring in some code. I remember bringing a prom that I had blown with a set of code on it, and I wanted to run it on this guy's computer. So that kind of stuff is more like working with code both before and after the meeting than tutorials. We thought that tutorials tend to be kind of a closed set. Once they're done, they don't inspire more creativity. It's like boring. So at least a couple of us here have some text analytics interest, NLP, and applying that to deep learning.
So we're all brand new to this, so but we just kind of deducted a couple ideas. One is the tech is a lot of fun, and it's great to focus on that, but really taking the time to understand how to design the experiment as a topic, and get down to the question you care about before you start hucking data at some kudu horse. It must be a data scientist over there. Then this next one's for you. Getting the data scientists to work with the mortals. So really, how does the whole team collaborate in an enterprise environment? How do you take this out of fun experiments and actually, get it into an enterprise data center working with? So I saw ops up there. That was awesome. And if anybody can help me with a bot that answers my wife's texts better than I do, that'd be awesome too. So thanks.
I mean, it's funny you say that. The ring got very heavy on my finger.
So yeah, we want to cover some of the theory, and also applied. So we got we want to cover deep reinforcement learning, deep learning applied to robotics. We want to see some tutorials revolving around deep reinforcement learning, and also the application of deep learning to finance or investments or even business.
So take deep reinforcement learning. There can be a really shallow version of that tutorial.
Okay.
Or something more advanced, something far more specific. Which spectrum were you guys thinking here?
I would say more beginner level. Yeah, beginner.
Thank you. So yeah, we were discussing about the topics that we would like to see in 2020. So one of the topic we were discussing were reinforcement learning and recommendation engine. I was coming to this meetup and they were more focused on deep learning. So use cases like how deep learning is applied in recommendation engine and reinforcement learning fields. And the next question, what changes were more code was really nice. The unique thing about this meetup I experience was you were having more code and tutorials, and a Q&A session about the code and the tutorial would be really nice, deep diving into the code which the people are showing. and kind of like explaining. Yeah, the next changes was explaining different kind of roles in the production, like data scientist. What does a data scientist do? What does a machine learning engineer do? So it would help new graduates or interns who are coming to attend this meetup. Thank you.
So far, a bit about reinforcement learning, a bit about recommendation engines, a bit about NLP. Here we go.
All right, we're overachievers here apparently. First was a talk on BERT and other sort of new NLP techniques along with your lines. I was thinking I could do one on how to do deep learning startup. One suggestion was, because a lot of people are just getting deep learning, maybe once a quarter, like maybe before the meetup, to have an hour-long tutorial specifically for people who just want to get an introduction. Another would be more joint meetups with other groups to combine forces in areas of mutual interest, for example, robotics. More computer vision. We haven't seen that much computer vision recently. Some sort of hackathon, maybe something for public good would be kind of cool. Something on deployment frameworks like Kubeflow, that sort of thing. I personally would love to see something on massive parallelism, so training across many machines or deploying across many machines. One suggestion was hardware build versus rent. Using and choosing AutoML. Also another +1 on reinforcement learning. Another about sort of what is deep learning. We can guess where that one came from. One idea was to do lightning talks. So instead of making one person come up with a big topic, just have a bunch of people come up with something small, hopefully a little bit easier. Something on debiasing algorithms. There's been a whole bunch of work in that area recently. Debiasing. Figuring out how to create unbiased outcomes from biased training data. Yeah, sorry. And that's probably more than enough from us.
That was fantastic. All right, next group.
So we're a group mostly of new people with one person who's been here a few times. Our ideas came down to, we like the idea of having a panel talking about ethics of AI, also getting into the debiasing or talking about how to remove bias from the algorithms, from the predictions, from all of that stuff. And then beyond that, we were talking about more tutorials, because when you show up, it's really hard to show up and have a conversation when all you're trying to do is write down the words that are being said so you can look them up on Google when you get home. We were also talking about code is awesome. We all love looking at code, but we may or may not have different experience with the code you're using. So step away from that into flow charting or something so it's like non-code specific, and then set up what were we saying? Workshops, where you can go back and have the meetup group and then have a workshop and record or stream that workshop so people can go back and look at it and get the more in-depth discussion on that code, and then jump back to the flow chart so you can then see how it flows through. And let's see. References and resources. So before any major talk, it would be nice to have like the documents or the articles or whatever you're using or whatever you're referring to, have it posted ahead of time. So those of us who are overachievers can actually read through and start picking out key points before we show up. Again, this comes back to being able to understand the words before they're used. And then, actually, there's another vote for the build your own versus cloud service. It would be also nice to have regular events where there's a discussion on cutting edge. What is up and coming? Everybody wants to get into this. Everybody wants to invest their time and energy. But if we are investing our time and energy what's at its peak right now, by the time we finally get up to speed, something else may have come over the horizon and our skill set now has to be refreshed. And then, articles. Have something where there's like recent articles, new events, new developments, all of that stuff, just like posted. And I'm now thinking about Reddit and some of the subreddits, but it would be nice to have some place where just news articles, even if they're from MSN or CNN, just something where they're talking about what's being developed and touching on it so that we don't have to read a 10-page scientific article. We can read a 2-paragraph written for a 6th grader article. It's still
Distill.org, that's a
yeah, distill.org.
One more that didn't get captured, and I saw this at one other meetup that I won't name, but they started the meeting with a newsreel where they went through like 5 happenings, articles of news and data science. One slide, okay? Just a couple of minutes. The whole thing took about less than 10 minutes. But it was really fun. You know, it was interesting. It moved fast. It was a great way to start the meeting and just get people's attention and their minds going.
3 more groups.
So we came up with a few. So on the more sort of broader general front, we had do stuff to do more that's industry relevant, more NLP stuff, embeddings, again, preferably with code. Getting a little more specific, and another point was, we don't record the videos, do we? We just stream them, right?
Good question. They are streamed and then they're VOD on YouTube.
Oh, they are actually, we are recording, good. So that's already done. Achievements. Okay, another thing, sort of getting more specific, is the sort of probabilistic Bayesian stuff, so PIME-C3, STAN, all of those things. And one of my personal favorites is like the approximate high-dimensional nearest neighbor search. That's, okay, and then a few more sort of specific things were like, things like alternatives to deep learning, like what are the current upcoming things that actually are competitive with deep learning, when not to use deep learning. Define deep learning again. Next time. Anyway, also things like more on the side of like what doesn't work yet. So more like problems that are ripe for machine learning, things where machine learning, where people are trying machine learning and aren't cutting it. So like, here is all the stuff we tried and didn't work, and more bounce around the ideas that actually, so things that we're just starting to get traction.
John?
Thanks, John. So some of the things that we had were touched on a little bit, but more in depth on on projects, whether they're personal or work related, like things you've built, more kind of deployment infrastructure. Also figuring out how to reconcile that need for more infrastructure and deployment talks with the need for deep learning to be part of the talk. So like what Matt said might be relevant about partnering with other meetups on that, rather than structuring a whole talk around deployment infrastructure that happens to be a neural net. More code being available, but not necessarily gone over in grueling detail in the talk. So not like going line by line through how this function works, but like somebody said, flowcharts, kind of more high level. Here's how the code works. I think ingesting a lot of code line by line during a talk is difficult. More understanding of the business and financial impact of the projects, or how your project can impact the organization as a whole. So, and just generally more context, does this, if it's something work related, what does this do for the profit and loss of my department, if relevant? And along the same lines, any social, ethical, legal impacts of the project. The panels, we like the panel idea. Panels are good. And then something Daniel just mentioned about the videos. I haven't been able to find those videos that were recorded. So maybe like if we have, you could spin up a Google site like really quickly and just archive all the talks, and say like, here's the talk, here's the video, here's the code, here's the slides, and just like boom, 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 something like that.
Yeah, just to reiterate what Jacob said, I'll hand this to you guys in just a moment. The YouTube videos are both live streamed and put on VOD. You can go to YouTube, and I think they're under Austin Tech Live. Or if you Google not Google, like go to YouTube and type Austin Deep Learning, it'll actually put you in Austin Tech Live, where you can see all the videos.
So in terms of format for the meetup, we had 3 suggestions. One of these was project-based code reviews, cooperative workshop of topics. I didn't really know how to summarize this in a couple words, but I know enough to say 5 minutes about something, but not an entire hour. So maybe like a lightning talks thing. In terms of topics, we had a few suggestions for these. Machine learning agents, game development, machine learning for better than asymptotic performance in algorithms, introduction to reinforcement learning, using physics-based simulations to train models, self-driving cars, how do you productize a research paper, training and using generative models, diagnosing poorly performing models, and inductive bias in over-parameterized models.
Okay, so when you're leading a meetup, there's always a gotcha. So here's the gotcha. So the goal wasn't just for me to capture those ideas. The goal was for you guys to generate these ideas, right? So first and foremost, if you did capture them, like in a notepad or Google Docs or something, can you please send me that? Like, it doesn't have to be organized in any way. Like, I think somebody was using, they wrote it down. Take a picture of it, you can send it to me. So how you send it to me, via the Slack channel is probably the easiest thing. I can give you a card with my email address on it if you'd like as well. But the goal was to get you guys to generate ideas. So naturally, what I'm going to ask is for volunteers. So I'm not going to code up all of these things. I'm not going to build all of these things. I like to do this on my spare time, but it is my spare time. So I am going to encourage you, and I will really encourage you as we move forward to take some of these ideas and to actually put them into action. I really like this lightning talk idea kept coming up, because Dylan captured it very, very well, because I've heard this from a number of people. I know a lot about a lot of things, but I don't know enough to put a whole hour-long conversation together or talk together. Can I just talk for 10 minutes? And so we've kind of discouraged that, but we're losing out on a lot of people who can give a 10-minute thing. So like that's something that's resonated here. So please send me those ideas if you will. I will try to circulate them across the entire meetup. But my goal ultimately, I'll compile them, I'll probably send them out in some way to the entire meetup. But really what I'm going to be looking to each of you is to, if you are interested in one of these ideas, there's no better way to learn a topic than to teach it, believe it or not. Even if you're fairly new to it, I think a lot of us have been there. So feel free, reach out, but I would encourage you to build this. The other thing I'm going to call out is what you talked about the Boston Computer Club before, is that literally showing some code, how can we make this better? How can I improve on this project? That would be a pretty cool thing. Try to figure out how to work that in. One more time, going to plug the Slack channel, because these are the types of conversations that you are having right here that we would like to continue over Slack, right? There's so many conversations that we end up having, and then we go off for a month, we don't have them, we get together. Please continue to keep these conversations going. But I would also like you to keep these conversations going across the street at CU29. So if you need a drink, I'll buy you some water. I'm happy to do that. But I will see you over there. Thanks again to Kung Fu and to Capital Factory. One last thing, if you need parking validation, I was told just now that Capital Factory, they can provide you parking validation if you parked in the parking garage downstairs after 5 o'clock and leave before 10 o'clock. Oh, yeah. I'll do that. I'll plug that. Here, I'll just go ahead and post this. Okay, so we have a journal club that meets 2 times a month. We get into some pretty advanced things. I just posted the link on on meetup.com, the one you signed up for. Was it?
Each card is a paper that we suggest you can drop, and we kind of have a flow of papers. If you just seen a paper and I'm not sure whether it caught you interesting, it goes in interesting. Suitable is a pretty low bar. If you look at it and sort of like you look like, is it just the right format? Like if it's a 200-page paper, we're probably not going to get to do it in 2 hours. You know, is it sort of false advertising? Like, does the abstract actually match what they say in the paper? So that's really a unilateral decision. One person can look at a paper that's interesting and just unilaterally move it to suitable. That's just that we think we could cover that in one session. Then, if you're willing to actually like step up and say, I'm going to be the person that takes the lead to discuss it, then you attach yourself to it and you put it in proposed. And then we vote on them, and the highest thing that's in proposed gets to go in selected. You should really, though, vote in things that are in suitable and interesting, because that will then encourage people to actually step up and say, okay, you know, if I want to give a talk, if I actually suggest something that has no votes on it, your chances of it actually getting voted all the way through are limited. But if there are papers that people are just voting on, but no one's putting their name on, you want to give a talk, put your name on that, put it in proposed, you're almost automatically in.
One other thing to add really quickly, so the voting mechanism, you just click on one of these cards. Hopefully you guys can see that. Oh, I'm not signed in. Oh yeah, I am. Yeah. I'm
Sign in, and there's an invite link in the chat. We don't want to leave it just completely dangling.
Oh yeah, okay. So if you're signed in, you see something you like, you click the vote, you click vote, and you will vote for it. It's as simple as that. It's really easy to use.
But you need to follow an invite link in order to be on there. The invite link is in the Slack because we don't want random people just messing.
Yeah, that is true.
You can see it open on the internet, but to actually vote and to move cards around, you've got to be signed in, and you automatically sign in by signing into the Slack and then following an invite link there.
There's just so many great papers on the list.
Yeah.
Even if you don't have time to go, which I haven't been able to lately, it's just fantastic. There's a lot of great papers. If you can puzzle your way through them, there's a lot of really good stuff.
I think one other thing to say about this is that you can easily fool yourself into thinking like, well, I don't understand what it's saying, therefore I shouldn't go. Most of the papers, half of us can't even read. So it's very good to have other people that you struggle through a paper with. And also meeting, twice a month forces you to really have a deadline, which is good for folks like myself to say, I have to read this paper by this time, get it done. And if I don't fully understand it, great, because neither does somebody else, right?
So tell them exactly actually what happens in the meeting itself. Because the people who haven't been here will not go for, just tell them what happens, what Abba and Daniel and you are doing there.
Yeah, so in essence what we do is we pick this paper, we're gonna go through it. One person generally leads it, and that's what Daniel was alluding to. So see this icon right here. Abai has stepped up and said he is going to potentially lead a discussion on that if it was selected in terms of votes. Then Abai will lead a discussion where he's really going to know quite a bit more about this paper because, I mean, that's kind of the expectation. He will lead a discussion on this very topic. We generally will go through kind of a quick high-level overview of the paper, and then we will go section by section and really, one, there's a overview of like, okay, this is what this equation is saying, or this is what this section is meaning. People will generally ask questions. What is equation 4 really saying? Why did they write it this way? In the prose, what does that even mean? Is that claim too strong, et cetera? So we do go step by step through a paper. Now, some of these papers are long, so you can only get so much done in an hour, but it's a very fruitful conversation.
One thing I'd add is that the format is more like what you'd call a whiteboard jam. So the person that's leading isn't like, it's not like a lecture. So the idea is they kind of guide the conversation, but like if people get, like the whole group can be stuck, and the one person who has a clue, they're the one that grabs the pen, they're the one that goes up to the whiteboard, they sketch out what they think, and then people try and poke holes in it. So it helps if people know what's going on. The other thing I would also say is that currently, like about 80% of the talks were led by Abai, about 10% of them were led by me, and like somewhere along the line we've had 1 or 2 people have given one. So the more people that actually step up, I think most people should be getting sick and tired of listening to me and Abai. So
I'm not.
And the third thing, next Tuesday, we're doing Consciousness Prior by Daniel.
Cool. All right. See you 29. All right, let's head over there. Thanks everybody for coming.